Chapter 1. The Sabotage. Ethan Hayes awoke to an unsettling silence. Something was wrong. The rhythmic hum of his farm's irrigation system, his usual morning soundtrack, was gone. No buzzing. No clicking. Just an eerie, unnatural stillness. His stomach twisted as he rushed to the window. Instead of the familiar mist of sprinklers coating his crops in the soft golden light of dawn, he saw dry soil, motionless pipes, and his cattle pacing uneasily by the barn. A sinking feeling settled in his gut as he bolted outside, his boots kicking up dust on the way to the breaker box. His fingers fumbled with the metal latch, yanking it open. The switches were intact, no signs of tripped circuits. Then he spotted it. His power lines had been slashed, dangling like limp vines from the poles, their raw edges exposed to the morning breeze. Someone had done this deliberately, and he already had a good idea who. When he stomped toward the main road, he spotted Madeline Harper standing on her porch, coffee in hand, wearing a smug little grin. Her oversized sunglasses barely hid the self-satisfied tilt of her face. "Morning, neighbor," she chirped, lifting her cup in a mock toast. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard it ached. "Did you do this?" His voice was razor-sharp. Madeline widened her eyes in exaggerated innocence. "Do what?" He gestured to the mutilated power lines. "My farm runs on that power, my irrigation, my storage freezers, my entire livelihood depends on it. And someone," he pointed at the severed cables, "decided to take a pair of cutters and shut me down." Madeline sipped her coffee leisurely, clearly enjoying his frustration. "Oh dear, that sounds terrible. But honestly, Ethan, those lines were such an eyesore. I did everyone a favor." His hands balled into fists. "A favor?" She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. "You know, it's a real shame about your little farm, but maybe you should have considered aesthetics before ruining the view for everyone else." Ethan could barely think straight over the roaring in his ears. He wasn't a violent man, but at that moment, he had to physically restrain himself from knocking that smirk right off her entitled face. Instead, he spun on his heel and stormed back toward his property, phone already in hand. He needed the power company. He needed legal action, and he needed Madeline to pay for this. Chapter 2. The Fallout. By midday, the sun bore down mercilessly, and his crops, already delicate from the recent heat wave, began wilting. His dairy products in storage were at risk of spoiling, and his animals used to his steady water supply started showing signs of agitation. Every passing hour without electricity meant financial losses stacking up like a bad poker hand. By afternoon, the power company arrived. The technician, a burly man in a hard hat, took one look at the hacked-up lines and let out a low whistle. "Damn, someone really had it out for you." Ethan crossed his arms, his jaw a hard line. "How soon can you fix it?" The man scratched his beard. "Normally, a week, maybe 2. But if you want an immediate fix, that'll run you about 15 grand. Special crew, rush job, you know the drill." Ethan's stomach sank. $15,000. He'd already budgeted tightly for the season, and dropping that kind of money overnight wasn't an option. His eyes drifted back toward Madeline's house. She had caused this. She had to be held responsible. Chapter 3. The Evidence. Later that evening, after making a few calls, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, reviewing his security footage. He had installed cameras around the farm after Madeline had trespassed before, complaining about the noise pollution from his generator. Sure enough, at around 3 a.m., the footage showed a figure sneaking along the fence line, bolt cutters in hand. The grainy night vision made details hard to catch, but the posture, the shape, it was unmistakably Madeline. His blood boiled. He rewound the clip, watching again as she took her time, positioning herself before slicing through the lines. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. This was premeditated. The next morning, Ethan walked straight into the sheriff's office, the footage loaded onto a USB. Sheriff Dawson, a no-nonsense man with decades of experience, leaned back in his chair as he watched the clip. When it ended, he let out a long breath and glanced at Ethan. "Well, I'll be damned." Ethan crossed his arms. "So what happens now?" Dawson sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Messing with power lines? That's a felony. Interfering with public utilities is S.A. serious business. She could be looking at a fine, maybe even jail time, depending on the judge." Ethan didn't flinch. "Good." The sheriff studied him for a moment. "You sure you want to go through with this? Lawsuits can get messy." Ethan's expression didn't waver. She cost me thousands. She knew exactly what she was doing. And she stood on her porch and smiled about it. Dawson let out a low chuckle. All right, then. Let's make her regret it. By the afternoon, an official notice was delivered to Madeline's door, informing her of the legal action against her. Ethan watched from a distance as she unfolded the paper, her expression shifting from amusement to irritation, then to outright panic. She whirled around, spotting Ethan standing by his truck. "Are you serious?" she shrieked, marching toward him, flailing the document like a battle flag. Ethan didn't even blink. "Dead serious. You can't do this. I was just committing a felony? Yeah, that's exactly what you did." Her face turned a blotchy shade of red. "Oh, come on, Ethan. This is ridiculous. It's just some wires. You're blowing this way out of proportion." Ethan nodded toward the sheriff's car parked by the road. "Try telling that to the judge." Madeline's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time since she moved in, she wasn't smirking. She was panicked. And Ethan savored every second of it. Chapter 4. The Counterattack. Madeline Harper wasn't the type to go down without a fight. The very next morning, Ethan awoke to something even more infuriating than the power outage. Posters. They were plastered everywhere, on street poles, community boards, and even on the fence by his property. Ethan Hayes, bully or neighbor. Underneath, in fine print, were a series of exaggerated complaints. Has harassed multiple residents over minor disputes. Filed a frivolous lawsuit that could cost the community thousands. Threatens the peaceful nature of Hollow Creek. Ethan clenched his jaw as he ripped one of the posters down. The nerve of that woman. A truck pulled up behind him. Lucas Calloway, his longtime friend and fellow farmer, leaned out the window. "Saw those all over town," Lucas said, tossing a crumpled poster into the passenger seat. "She's trying to turn the town against you." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Let her try. The truth's on my side." Lucas smirked. "Yeah? Then we better make sure everyone hears it." Chapter 5. The Town Meeting Showdown. That evening, Ethan attended the Hollow Creek town meeting. The entire community had shown up, likely thanks to Madeline stirring the pot. As soon as Ethan walked in, he could feel the tension in the air. Madeline stood at the front, addressing the crowd with her usual self-righteous flair. "This town has always been a place of harmony, but some people don't believe in compromise," she said, pointedly glancing at Ethan. "Do we want to be a town where neighbors sue neighbors? Where petty grievances turn into legal battles?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Petty grievances?" he echoed. "Madeline, I have security footage of you trespassing onto my property and cutting my power lines. That's not a grievance. That's a felony." Silence. Sheriff Dawson, seated in the back, cleared his throat. "Mr. Hayes isn't wrong. There's legal evidence against MS. Harper. This isn't just a disagreement between neighbors. It's a criminal offense." Madeline's expression flickered with unease before she quickly masked it. "So I made a mistake. But dragging this to court? It's excessive." Ethan leveled his gaze at her. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And now you get to deal with the consequences." The room remained quiet for a beat. Then, one by one, people started nodding. A few voices murmured their support for Ethan. Madeline had overplayed her hand. Chapter 6. The Verdict. 2 weeks later, Madeline Harper stood in a courtroom, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he charged by the breath. Ethan sat on the opposite side, watching as the judge reviewed the evidence. "MS. Harper," the judge said, adjusting his glasses. "The evidence against you is clear. You will pay restitution for $20,000 to Mr. Hayes for damages and loss of income. Additionally, you will serve 6 months probation, during which any further infractions will result in immediate jail time." Madeline's mouth fell open. "Your Honor, that is my ruling. Case dismissed." With a bang of the gavel, it was over. Ethan let out a slow breath, a deep sense of relief washing over him. Justice had been served. Chapter 7. A New Beginning. A month later, Hollow Creek felt different. Better. Madeline's house was up for sale. She had lost her social standing and her influence, and now she was leaving town. One evening, as Ethan sat on his porch, Lucas walked up with 2 beers in hand. "So she's really gone, huh?" Ethan took a sip and looked out at his thriving farm. The fields were green again. His cattle were strong. His farm had survived. He smiled. Yeah, and I think this town is better for it. They clinked bottles, a silent acknowledgement of the battle they had won. Hollow Creek was finally free. Chapter 8. A Storm on the Horizon. With Madeline Harper gone, Ethan Hayes thought his troubles were over. But in Hollow Creek, peace never lasted long. A few weeks after her departure, Ethan received a legal notice in the mail. Notice of pending litigation, Harper Va Associates, LLC. His stomach twisted as he read the fine print. Madeline had sold her land to a development company, and they were planning to turn her old property into a commercial complex. Lucas slammed the letter down on the kitchen table. You've got to be kidding me. The whole town fought against Madeline's nonsense, and now she's selling out to a bunch of suits. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. If this deal goes through, Hollow Creek won't be a farm town anymore. It'll be a strip mall with a couple of parking lots. Lucas exhaled sharply. So what do? Ethan clenched his jaw. We stop them. Chapter 9. The Fight for Hollow Creek. The next morning, Ethan gathered the town council and local farmers. Hollow Creek had always been a close-knit community, but if they didn't fight back, they'd be swallowed by development. This isn't just about my farm, Ethan told the crowd. If this deal goes through, they won't stop with Madeline's land. They'll keep expanding, turning every open field into another gas station or fast food chain. We have to protect our town. Nods of agreement spread through the room. Then someone spoke up. How do we stop a multi-million-dollar company? An older farmer asked. Ethan pulled out a folder and spread documents across the table. We make it impossible for them to build. He tapped on a zoning map of Hollow Creek. The only way they can develop this land is if the county approves their rezoning request. If we can get enough signatures to oppose it, we can force the council to reject their permit. Lucas grinned. So we take this fight to the people. Chapter 10. The Petition War. For the next 2 weeks, Ethan and his allies worked nonstop. They went door to door, explaining the dangers of corporate expansion and how it would destroy their way of life. Meanwhile, Harper Va Associates sent their own representatives, offering incentives, promising jobs, and spreading rumors that Ethan's farm was holding the town back. One morning, Ethan caught sight of a slick-looking man in a designer suit chatting with locals outside the diner. He recognized the name on the legal notice. Nathan Cole, corporate liaison. Ethan strode up, arms crossed. Trying to buy the town out from under us? Nathan turned, smiling. Mr. Hayes, is it? I've heard a lot about you. Yeah? Well, I know exactly what your company is planning. And we're not selling out. Nathan sighed. It's just progress, Ethan. You can't stop what's coming. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Watch me. Chapter 11. The Final Vote. The county council meeting was packed. Half the town had shown up to support Ethan's fight, while the other half, swayed by corporate promises, sided with the developers. Nathan Cole stood confidently before the council. Hollow Creek has the potential to grow into something more. More businesses mean more jobs. More revenue. We're offering this town a future. Ethan stepped up next. Hollow Creek already has a future. And it doesn't involve selling our history to the highest bidder. This town was built on farming, on community, and on families who have lived here for generations. A strip mall doesn't bring progress. It brings destruction. The room was silent. Then, the council chairman cleared his throat. We've reviewed both sides. The final vote is rezoning request denied. A roar of applause filled the room. The fight was over. Chapter 12. A Town Reclaimed. Weeks later, life in Hollow Creek returned to normal. The developers pulled out. The land remained untouched. Lucas and Ethan sat on the farmhouse porch, watching the sunset over the open fields. We saved it, Lucas said. The town. The farm. Everything. Ethan smiled. Yeah. And this time, it's staying that way. For the first time in years, Hollow Creek was truly safe. And no one, not Madeline, not Harper Va Associates, would ever change that again. Chapter 13. Shadows of the Past. With Hollow Creek safe from developers, Ethan thought he could finally breathe. But peace never lasted long in this town. One evening, as Ethan and Lucas sat on the farmhouse porch, a familiar truck pulled up. Sheriff Dawson stepped out, his expression unreadable. Evening, boys, Dawson said, tipping his hat. I hate to bring bad news, But you need to see this. He handed Ethan a manila folder filled with documents. Ethan skimmed through them, new purchase records, land acquisitions, and a corporate contract. Lucas frowned. What the hell is this? Dawson sighed. Madeline Harper might be gone, but she left behind a mess. It looks like she signed a contract right before she left, giving an unknown private investor control over a large portion of the town's land. Ethan's grip tightened on the folder. Who owns it now? Dawson hesitated before answering. Nathan Cole. Chapter 14. The Return of the Suit. Ethan stormed into the town diner the next morning, where Nathan Cole sat sipping his coffee, a picture of calm arrogance. What the hell is this, Cole? Ethan threw the documents onto the table. You lost the rezoning vote. Now you're buying up land in secret. Nathan didn't even flinch. Business is about playing the long game, Ethan. I may have lost the battle, but I never intended to lose the war. Ethan's jaw clenched. Hollow Creek isn't for sale. Nathan smiled. Oh, but parts of it already are. I own 20% of this town now. You think you stopped me? You only delayed the inevitable. Ethan felt a cold wave of anger wash over him. He had underestimated Cole. Madeline was a thorn, but Cole? He was a python waiting to strike. Chapter 15. The Land War Begins. Ethan gathered the townspeople that evening at the barn. The tension was thick. People knew something was wrong. Nathan Cole owns a fifth of Hollow Creek now, Ethan said bluntly. And if we don't stop him, he'll find a way to take more. Murmurs of concern spread through the crowd. Lucas stepped forward. We fought off the rezoning, but that won't matter if he buys out every farm and business one by one. So how do we stop him? Someone called out. Ethan set his jaw. We don't sell. Not to him. Not to his company. Not to anyone connected to him. We make it impossible for him to expand. Heads nodded in agreement, but not everyone looked convinced. Some people were struggling financially. Cole's money would be tempting. And that was his strategy. Starve the town until they had no choice but to sell. Chapter 16. Divide and Conquer. Over the next few weeks, Cole's plan went into motion. He offered small businesses huge buyouts. He created artificial shortages by buying out key suppliers. He spread rumors that the town's economy was failing, scaring people into thinking selling was their only option. And worse, some people were starting to believe him. Ethan slammed his fist on the table one night. He's playing dirty. If people start selling, we lose everything. Lucas leaned back. Then we fight dirty, too. Chapter 17. The Counterattack. Ethan and his allies launched a counterstrike against Cole's tactics. They created a community fund to help struggling businesses resist selling out. They exposed Cole's manipulation tactics in local news, revealing how he was creating a fake crisis. They started buying back land from sellers before Cole could get to them. Slowly, momentum shifted. The town rallied together. Cole was furious. And when a man like Cole got desperate, he got dangerous. Chapter 18. The Final Battle. Cole made his final move in broad daylight. One morning, Ethan woke up to bulldozers parked on the edge of town. Cole had found a loophole. He owned a small strip of land with a public access road. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start building. Ethan grabbed his keys. We end this. Now. By the time he reached the construction site, half the town was already there, blocking the entrance. Cole stepped forward, his usual smirk in place. You can't stop this. It's legal. Ethan stared him down. Try us. What followed was a standoff, unlike anything Hollow Creek had ever seen. The town refused to move. The construction crew refused to cross them. And after 10 hours of nonstop resistance, the county was forced to intervene. A ruling was made. Cole's project was officially shut down. For the first time, Cole looked defeated. Chapter 19. A New Dawn. Weeks later, Cole sold off his land and left town. Hollow Creek had won again. As Ethan and Lucas sat on the farmhouse porch that evening, Ethan let out a long breath. Think this time, it'll finally stay safe? Lucas asked. Ethan smiled. Yeah. This time, it's staying that way. And as the sun set over the untouched fields, Hollow Creek stood as a testament to what a town could do when it fought for its home.